So today we're celebrating the Solemnity of Saints Peter and Paul, two of the hugely important figures in the history of the Church, and unsurprisingly, both of them contributed hugely to the development of the Church. We take St. Peter first. As we know, during Christ's earthly ministry, he gathered around himself a group of friends and companions, and 12 of these were particularly important. They were called the 12, and collectively and individually they played key roles in witnessing to Christ and building up his church. But among the 12, one held a particularly important role, St. Peter. Peter, was sometimes impetuous, on an occasion even denied Christ. From time to time he gets things wrong. Nevertheless, he was still deputed by Christ to exercise a particular role of leadership within Christ's church, namely that of looking after Christ's flock, a task which continued once Christ had ascended to heaven to join his Father. And in exercising that task, Peter worked first in Jerusalem, then later at Antioch, where he became Antioch's first bishop, and then later still at Rome, where likewise he became Rome's first bishop, and thus Rome became Peter's see. Paul, on the other hand, was not one of the 12. Originally, Paul had been a Pharisee, and he had persecuted Christians until he was famously converted on the road to Damascus with that direct encounter with God. From that moment on, Paul worked tirelessly to promote the faith. He became the church's greatest missionary, going backwards and forwards across the Mediterranean world several times during the course of Paul's 3 great missionary journeys. So we've got these 2 magnificent saints, but why celebrate them both today? Might it have been better to celebrate them on their own separate feast days? Well, I don't think it would, because each time we profess our faith, as later on we will today, we say that we believe the Church is one holy, Catholic, and apostolic. We profess that. And today's feast, when we celebrate the lives of both these saints, allows us to focus, I think, in a particular way on 2 of those qualities which we attribute to the Church, namely that it is Catholic and apostolic. Basically, Catholic just means universal, yet it's absolutely central to the Church's identity, because the Church is universal in 2 ways. First, because Christ is present in the Church and has bequeathed to it the fullness of everything that's needed for salvation. And then second, because the Church has a mission to all people, every single one of them. Christ didn't come just to save a select few. He wanted to save all people. The salvation Christ offers is not forced on any of us. So despite Christ's desire to save everyone, some people will reject that offer. Still, the offer itself is universal, and the Church, as the body which proclaims that offer, must do so to all people in all times and in all places. And it's that second sense of universal that's relevant to St. Peter's and Paul. Because of the Church's universal mission, the gospel had to be proclaimed to the ends of the earth. That meant new groups of people would hear it, respond to it, and subsequently have to be integrated into the Church. And during this, Peter and Paul played complementary roles. Paul took the gospel to the Gentiles, whilst Peter held the Church together through his ministry as it adapted to the large numbers of non-Jewish Christians among it. So in celebrating this feast today, we're celebrating the events that ultimately made it possible for non-Jewish people to become Christians. But what about the Church as apostolic? Well, once again, being apostolic is fundamental to the Church's identity. The faith the Church preaches and teaches is the faith which was handed on to it by the apostles, who themselves received it from Jesus Christ. It's that faith which the Church preaches, and it's that faith which the Church is tasked to preserve. Because in the final analysis, it's only that faith which we can be confident will save us. And here again, Peter and Paul played a key role. Both of them were apostles, but Paul was the key figure in transmitting the faith to others, whilst Peter was the key figure for regulating the faith of the church. So as we celebrate this feast today, let us thank God for the work he achieved through Saints Peter and Paul, and let us pray that the church will continue to flourish and proclaim the gospel to the ends of the earth.